The bruised boy sitting in the back of AP Chemistry wasn't just another punching bag for the school's elite. He was the only son of the man who secretly owned the police, the mayor, and the city itself. When the Golden Boys crossed the line, they didn't just ruin a high school hierarchy. They started a war. Oak Ridge Preparatory Academy was a fortress of glass and ivy, a place where Chicago's wealthiest families sent their children to be groomed for Ivy League futures. The parking lot was a sea of Porsches, Range Rovers, and Teslas. The hallways smelled of expensive perfume and generational entitlement. In this ecosystem of extreme privilege, Leo Russo was a ghost. At 17, Leo was tall but slouched, hiding his broad shoulders beneath oversized, faded hoodies. His dark hair always fell slightly over his eyes, obscuring the sharp, calculating gaze he had inherited from his father. He didn't wear designer labels. He didn't attend the weekend rages in the Hamptons or the penthouse suites downtown. He walked the halls with a calculated silence, carrying a battered leather sketchbook, speaking only when called upon. The students at Oak Ridge assumed he was a charity case, a scholarship kid from the wrong side of the tracks who somehow lucked into their elite ranks. They couldn't have been more wrong. Leo's father, Vincent Russo, didn't just have money. He had power, the kind of terrifying, blood-soaked power that wasn't tracked on the Forbes list. Vincent was the head of the Chicago Syndicate, a man whose whispered name made seasoned detectives look over their shoulders. But Vincent had one strict, unbreakable rule for his son: stay invisible. The civilian world is a stage, Leonardo, Vincent had told him years ago, his heavy, ringed hand resting on Leo's small shoulder in his smoke-filled mahogany office. Let them think you are nothing. The moment they know who you are, they will either fear you or they will use you. You go to school. You get your grades. You come home to our world. So Leo played his part flawlessly. He absorbed the sneers, the shoves in the hallway, and the cruel whispers. But high school ecosystems demand a bottom rung, and at Oak Ridge, that spot was designated for Leo by Trent Harrington. Trent was the untouchable golden boy, captain of the lacrosse team, heir to a massive real estate fortune, and the son of Senator Thomas Harrington. Trent was arrogant, vicious, and deeply insecure, masking his flaws with a terrifying charisma. It was a cold Tuesday in November when the harassment shifted from passive to physical. Leo was sitting alone in the cafeteria, sketching the brutalist architecture of the courtyard, when a shadow fell over his table. Trent, flanked by his two massive lackeys, Bryce and Connor, stood there grinning. "Nice drawing, freak," Trent sneered, snatching the sketchbook from Leo's hands. Leo didn't stand up. He kept his eyes fixed on the grain of the table. "Give it back, Trent." "Oh, he speaks," Bryce chuckled, leaning heavily against the table. Trent flipped through the pages, his face twisting in mock disgust. "What is this dark, depressing garbage? You shooting up the school next week, Russo?" With a casual flick of his wrist, Trent dropped the sketchbook into a half-eaten bowl of tomato soup sitting on a nearby tray. The thick red liquid soaked into the delicate charcoal pages instantly. Leo's jaw clenched. The muscles in his forearms coiled. A lethal instinct, bred into his DNA, screamed at him to grab Trent by the throat and smash his perfect, grinning face into the linoleum. He could do it. His father's enforcers had taught him hand-to-hand combat since he was 10. It would take exactly 3 seconds to shatter Trent's jaw. "Stay invisible." Leo exhaled slowly, unclenched his fists, and stood up. He reached into the soup, pulled out the ruined, dripping book, and walked away without a word, leaving Trent and his friends laughing hysterically. He retreated to the empty AP chemistry lab to clean up. He was running cold water over his hands in the sink when he heard a soft voice behind him. "He's a monster, you know." Leo turned. Standing in the doorway was Chloe Montgomery. Chloe was everything Leo wasn't supposed to notice. She was the daughter of Richard Montgomery, the district attorney of Chicago, the very man who had spent the last 5 years trying to put Vincent Russo behind bars. She was radiantly beautiful, with piercing green eyes and a kind, empathetic smile that felt entirely out of place in the cutthroat halls of Oak Ridge. "It's fine," Leo muttered, turning back to the sink. "It's not fine," Chloe insisted, stepping closer. She pulled a wad of paper towels from the dispenser and handed them to him. "Trent has been horrible to you all semester. Why don't you report him?" "To who?" Leo asked dryly, wiping the pink-stained water from his hands. "The principal plays golf with his dad. It is what it is." Chloe frowned, her eyes dropping to his hands. She noticed the calluses on his knuckles, the faint, faded scars that spoke of a life rougher than the one he projected. "You shouldn't let him treat you like that. You don't deserve it." Leo looked at her, truly looked at her, for the first time. There was no pity in her eyes, just a genuine, fierce frustration on his behalf. Something shifted in his chest, a dangerous, warm flutter. "Thanks for the towels, Chloe," he said softly, offering a rare, faint smile. From that afternoon on, an unspoken orbit formed between them. They started partnering up in chemistry. They found themselves sitting at adjacent tables in the library. Chloe would slip him notes folded like origami during history class. Leo would draw quick, beautiful sketches of her while she wasn't looking. For Leo, Chloe became a sliver of sunlight in a life divided between high school misery and Mafia shadows. He knew it was dangerous. If his father knew he was talking to the DA's daughter, all hell would break loose. If the DA knew his daughter was talking to a Russo, he'd pull her from the school immediately. But for the first time in his life, Leo didn't want to be invisible. He wanted to be seen by her. By February, the brutal Chicago winter had set in, and the bullying at Oak Ridge had escalated. Trent Harrington was not an idiot. He was hyper-aware of the social dynamics of his kingdom, and he had noticed the quiet intimacy growing between Chloe and Leo. Trent had considered Chloe his property since sophomore year, despite her repeated rejections of his advances. Seeing her laugh at something the charity case whispered in her ear drove Trent into a venomous rage. The retaliation was methodical. First, it was the destruction of Leo's locker. Leo arrived on a Monday to find his combination lock smashed and his textbooks soaked in bleach. Then came the physical accidents. A tripped foot on the stairs that sent Leo tumbling down a half-flight, bruising his ribs. A lacrosse ball thrown with pinpoint accuracy at the back of his head during PE. Leo endured it all in stony silence. He patched himself up in the school bathrooms, hiding the bruises beneath his thick hoodies before his armored SUV picked him up at the end of the day. But Trent's cruelty peaked 2 weeks before the spring formal. It was late Friday afternoon. The school was mostly empty, the fading winter sun casting long, skeletal shadows through the hallway windows. Leo was packing his bag in the locker room after a mandatory gym makeup session. The heavy metal doors swung open and the lock clicked shut. Leo didn't have to turn around. He could hear the heavy, booted footsteps. Trent, Bryce, and a junior named Kyle surrounded him, blocking the narrow aisle between the lockers. "Where are you rushing off to, Russo?" Trent asked, twirling a combination lock on his finger. "Got a hot date with Chloe?" Leo zipped his bag, keeping his face entirely blank. "Move, Trent." "Or what?" Bryce scoffed, shoving Leo hard in the chest. Leo stumbled backward, his spine hitting the metal lockers with a loud clang. "You think you're so smart," Trent sneered, stepping into Leo's personal space. The smell of expensive cologne and spearmint gum was suffocating. "You think because she feels sorry for you, you actually have a shot? You're a stray dog, Russo. You don't belong here." Trent reached out and grabbed the silver chain hanging around Leo's neck. It was a heavy, intricate crucifix, the only piece of his true life he wore, given to him by his late mother. Leo's eyes darkened. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. "Take your hand off that." "Make me," Trent challenged, yanking the chain hard. The silver links snapped. Before Leo could process the disrespect to his mother's memory, survival instinct took over. Without thinking, Leo's hand shot out, his fingers locking around Trent's throat with terrifying speed. He slammed the golden boy against the opposite lockers. The metal buckled under the impact. Trent gasped, his eyes going wide with shock as he stared into the sudden, murderous coldness in the quiet kid's eyes. For a fraction of a second, the predator was unleashed. But then, Bryce and Kyle moved. A heavy gym bag swung into the side of Leo's head, blinding him with a flash of white light. His grip on Trent loosened, and the three boys descended on him. They kicked him in the ribs, punched him in the jaw, and left him bleeding on the cold tile floor. Trent stood over him, straightening his collar, his face flushed with adrenaline and bruised pride. He spat on the ground near Leo's face. "Know your place, trash," Trent hissed, before dropping the broken crucifix into a nearby trash can. The three of them walked out, laughing nervously, leaving Leo in the dark. It took Leo 20 minutes to drag himself to his feet. His ribs screamed with every breath, and a deep cut above his left eyebrow dripped blood into his eye. He fished his mother's crucifix out of the trash, clutching it in his bruised palm. He bypassed his usual pickup spot, knowing the driver, Dominic, would ask questions. Instead, Leo walked 3 miles in the freezing sleet to the Russo estate, slipping through the back service entrance. He thought he had made it to his bedroom unseen. He was sitting on the edge of his massive 4-poster bed, pressing a wet towel to his bleeding eyebrow, when the heavy oak door slowly pushed open. Standing in the doorway was Vincent Russo. Vincent was a massive man, imposing not just in physical size, but in the sheer gravity of his presence. He wore a custom 3-piece suit that cost more than most cars, his dark hair slicked back, a cigar smoldering in his left hand. Vincent's dark eyes locked onto his son's bruised, bloody face. The silence in the room became absolute, heavy and suffocating. Leo swallowed hard, lowering the towel. "I fell," he lied, his voice raspy. "Slipped on the ice outside the gym." Vincent didn't say a word. He stepped into the room, closing the door softly behind him. He walked over to his son, his polished Italian leather shoes making no sound on the Persian rug. He reached out with a scarred, powerful hand and gently tilted Leo's chin upward, examining the cut on his brow, the swelling of his jaw, and the dark purple blossoming along his cheekbone. "Ice does not leave knuckle imprints, Leonardo," Vincent said. His voice was a low, terrifying rumble, devoid of anger, but vibrating with a lethal, icy calm. Leo looked away. "Dad, please, it's nothing. Just some guys at school." Vincent let go of his son's chin and took a slow drag of his cigar. He exhaled the smoke towards to the ceiling. "I told you to be invisible. I did not tell you to be a victim. If I fight back, they'll look into me. They'll look into us, Leo argued, wincing as a sharp pain shot through his ribs. I'm following your rules. Vincent looked at the broken silver chain clutched in Leo's fist. He recognized his late wife's crucifix instantly. The Don's jaw clenched, a tiny, almost imperceptible muscle ticking near his temple. Who? Vincent asked softly. I handled it. It's fine. I will not ask you a second time, Leo. Give me a name. Leo knew what would happen if he gave his father the name. Trent Harrington would disappear. It wouldn't be a beating. It would be a body at the bottom of Lake Michigan. No, Leo said firmly, looking his terrifying father dead in the eye. This is my life, my school. I will handle it my way. Vincent stared at him for a long, tense moment. Then, surprisingly, he gave a slow, grim nod. Very well. Have Dr. Aris stitch that eye. If you are going to bleed, you will not bleed on my rugs. Vincent turned and walked out of the room. Leo thought he had won the argument. He thought the matter was closed. He didn't know his father. As soon as Vincent reached the hallway, he pulled a burner phone from his inside pocket and dialed a number. The line picked up on the first ring. Dominic, Vincent said, his voice dropping into the terrifying cadence of the syndicate boss. My son came home covered in blood today. He won't give me a name. Understood, boss, came the gravelly reply on the other end. What do you need? I want the security footage from Oak Ridge Preparatory pulled for the last 48 hours. Every hallway, every locker room, every parking lot. I want a dossier on every student my son interacts with. Vincent paused, his eyes turning as hard and black as obsidian. Find out who put their hands on my blood. And Dominic? Yes, boss. Prepare the basement. It took Dominic exactly 4 hours to acquire the Oak Ridge Preparatory security footage. A brief, terrifying conversation in an alleyway behind a diner with the school's head of IT, coupled with an envelope containing $10,000 in unmarked bills, ensured the encrypted files were handed over without a single question. In the subterranean, soundproofed basement of the Russo estate, Vincent sat in a leather armchair, staring at a massive monitor. The glow of the screen cast harsh shadows over his sharp, weathered features. Dominic stood silently behind him, his arms crossed over his tailored suit. On the screen, the locker room ambush played out in high definition. Vincent watched as the 3 boys cornered his son. He watched Trent Harrington shove Leo, watched the silver crucifix snap, and watched the brutal, cowardly beating that followed. Vincent's expression never changed. He didn't shout. He didn't curse. But the silence in the room grew so dense, it felt like the air pressure was dropping. The ringleader, Vincent finally spoke, his voice barely a whisper. Who is he? Dominic stepped forward, tapping a tablet. Trent Harrington, 18, captain of the lacrosse team. His father is Thomas Harrington. Vincent's eyes narrowed slightly. Senator Harrington. Yes, boss. The same senator pushing the waterfront redevelopment project, the one trying to push our union contracts out of the Southside docks. Dominic hesitated, then swiped to a different file. There's something else you need to see, from earlier in the week. The video shifted to the school cafeteria and then to the chemistry lab. Vincent watched his son interact with a blonde girl with piercing green eyes. He saw the rare, genuine smile on Leo's face. Chloe Montgomery, Dominic stated carefully. Daughter of Richard Montgomery, the district attorney. Vincent leaned back in his chair, a cold, predatory smile slowly touching the corners of his mouth. The chessboard was suddenly glowing with neon lines of vulnerability. The DA, who had sworn to dismantle the Chicago syndicate, and the senator trying to steal their territory. Both of their children were deeply entangled with the sole heir to the Russo Empire. "Dominic," Vincent murmured, never taking his eyes off the frozen image of Trent Harrington's grinning face. "Cancel my meetings for the rest of the week. Gather the financial records on Senator Harrington. Every offshore account, every gambling debt, every mistress. And prepare a suit for Leonardo. The boy is going to a dance." The following Monday, Leo returned to Oak Ridge. He wore his usual oversized hoodie, but it couldn't hide the dark purple bruising along his jaw or the neat row of black stitches above his eye. As he walked down the main corridor, the murmurs followed him like a swarm of bees. Trent and his crew were lounging by the water fountain. When Trent saw Leo, he smirked, raising an invisible glass in a mocking toast. He thought he had broken the quiet kid. He thought he had won. Leo ignored him, walking straight to his locker. Before he could even open it, a soft hand touched his arm. It was Chloe. Her eyes widened in horror as she took in his battered face. "Oh my God, Leo," she breathed, her voice trembling. She reached up, her fingers grazing the unbruised side of his cheek. "Who did this to you? Was it Trent?" "It doesn't matter," Leo said quietly, looking down at her. "I'm fine, Chloe." "It does matter," she fired back, tears of frustration shining in her green eyes. "You can't keep letting them get away with this. Please let me talk to my dad. He's the DA. He can have the police look into Trent. Assault is a crime, Leo." Leo felt a sharp spike of panic. "No, absolutely not. Keep your father out of this, Chloe. I mean it." She stared at him, hurt and confused by his sudden intensity. "Why are you protecting him?" "I'm not protecting Trent," Leo said softly, leaning in close so only she could hear. "I'm protecting you. Just trust me. Let it go." She didn't want to let it go, but the vulnerability in his eyes stopped her. She took a deep breath, composing herself. "Fine. But I'm not leaving you alone with him anymore. The spring formal is this Saturday. You're coming with me." Leo blinked, taken aback. "Chloe, I don't go to dances, especially not at the Drake Hotel. It's not my scene." "Too bad," she said, a fiery determination replacing her tears. "You're my date. Pick me up at 7. When Leo told his father about the dance, expecting a lecture about keeping a low profile, Vincent merely nodded. "A man should always escort a beautiful woman when asked, Leonardo. We will ensure you look the part." Leo had no idea that his father was already 3 steps ahead, orchestrating a masterclass in psychological warfare. The spring formal was held in the legendary Gold Coast Room at the Drake Hotel, a historic beacon of Chicago luxury overlooking Lake Michigan. The ballroom was dripping with crystal chandeliers, filled with the daughters and sons of the city's elite, dressed in thousands of dollars of silk and velvet. When Leo arrived, the entire room seemed to hold its breath. He had shed the faded hoodies and the slouching posture. Tonight, he wore a bespoke midnight black Brioni tuxedo, tailored flawlessly to his broad shoulders. His dark hair was styled perfectly, and the bruising on his face had faded to a faint shadow, giving him a dangerous, rugged edge. He walked with the terrifying, effortless confidence of a true Russo. Beside him, Chloe looked breathtaking in an emerald green gown, her arm looped through his. Trent Harrington was standing by the ice sculpture, a glass of smuggled scotch in his hand. When he saw Leo, his face flushed crimson with rage. He couldn't stand it. The charity case was outshining him, walking arm in arm with the girl Trent felt he owned. For 2 hours, Trent seethed from afar. But as the clock neared 11, he made his move. Leo and Chloe had stepped out onto one of the private marble balconies to escape the suffocating heat of the ballroom. They were laughing at a joke Leo had made, standing inches apart, when the heavy glass doors slammed open. Trent stood there, flanked by Bryce and Kyle. He locked the balcony door behind him, trapping Leo and Chloe outside in the cool night air. "Nice suit, Russo," Trent slurred, his words heavy with alcohol and malice. "Did you rent it, or did you steal it?" Chloe stepped forward, her eyes blazing. "Leave us alone, Trent. You're drunk. I'll call security." "Shut up, Chloe," Trent snapped, pointing a trembling finger at her. "You're embarrassing yourself. You're the DA's daughter, and you're slumming it with street trash." He turned his venomous glare back to Leo. "I warned you to stay away from her, didn't I? Did you forget what happened in the locker room? I can break you again right here." Leo didn't flinch. He slowly stepped in front of Chloe, shielding her. He looked at Trent not with fear, but with an icy, hollow pity. "You don't know what you're doing, Trent," Leo said, his voice terrifyingly calm. "Walk away. This is your only warning." Trent laughed bitterly, reaching into his tuxedo jacket. "You think you're tough? You think—" Before Trent could finish his sentence, the heavy glass doors to the balcony didn't just open. They shattered. The heavy brass-handled lock was blown clean off by a suppressed gunshot, the sound muffled by the music inside. Trent, Bryce, and Kyle screamed, dropping to the marble floor in terror. Stepping through the shattered glass was not hotel security. It was Dominic, flanked by 3 men in dark suits, their hands casually resting inside their jackets. And behind them, stepping into the cold night air with the regal, terrifying presence of an apex predator, was Vincent Russo. The music inside the ballroom abruptly cut off. The sudden silence was deafening. Vincent ignored the 3 boys cowering on the ground. He looked at his son, offering a curt nod, then looked at Chloe. "Miss Montgomery, you look lovely this evening. My apologies for the interruption." Chloe was frozen, recognizing the notorious Mafia boss from the case files on her father's desk at home. She looked from Vincent to Leo, her mind spinning as the horrifying, impossible pieces clicked together. "Dad?" Leo sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. "I told you I had this." "You did, Leonardo," Vincent agreed smoothly. "But I decided to take an interest in your extracurriculars." From inside the ballroom, a panicked voice broke the silence. "Trent, what is going on out here?" Senator Thomas Harrington rushed out onto the balcony, surrounded by 2 panicked bodyguards. But the moment the senator saw Vincent Russo standing there, the blood drained entirely from his face. His knees visibly buckled. Vincent," the senator stammered, his political bravado evaporating instantly. "Thomas," Vincent replied, his voice a low, lethal purr. He pulled a thick manila envelope from his jacket and tossed it onto the ground near the senator's polished shoes. "I believe you dropped something. The deeds to your offshore holdings in the Caymans, the photos from that hotel room in Vegas, and the ledger of the $3 million you owe to my associates at Gibson's." The senator stared at the envelope as if it were a live grenade. Vincent stepped closer to the terrified politician, dominating his personal space. "I don't care about your politics, Thomas, but your son put his hands on my blood. He shattered my late wife's crucifix. He bled the heir to the syndicate." Trent, still on his hands and knees, looked up, his face pale with absolute, paralyzing horror. The heir, the charity case, The quiet kid he had been beating up for months was Vincent Russo's son. "Please," Senator Harrington choked out, tears welling in his eyes. "Vincent, I didn't know. He didn't know. I'll give you the waterfront. I'll back off the union contracts. Whatever you want, just don't hurt him." Vincent looked down at Trent like he was a cockroach. "I don't kill children, Thomas. But by Monday morning, your son will be enrolled in a military boarding school in Switzerland. If he ever sets foot in Chicago again, if he ever looks in the direction of my son or Miss Montgomery again, they will never find his body." "Yes," the senator sobbed, dropping to his knees beside his trembling son. "Yes, understood." Vincent turned his gaze to Chloe, who was shaking, her hand still tightly gripped in Leo's. "Your father is a righteous man, Miss Montgomery," Vincent said softly. "Tell the DA that Vincent Russo sends his regards, and tell him that as long as you are with my son, no harm will ever come to your family." With a final, lingering look at Leo, Vincent adjusted his cuffs, turned, and walked back through the shattered doors, his men vanishing like ghosts into the Chicago night. The balcony was dead silent, save for the pathetic weeping of Trent Harrington. Leo turned to Chloe. He expected her to run. He expected the DA's daughter to flee from the monster he truly was. But Chloe didn't run. She looked at Trent, broken and pathetic on the floor, and then she looked at Leo. Her hands stopped shaking. She squeezed his fingers, pulling him slightly closer. "So," she whispered, a fierce, unbreakable spark in her green eyes, "you're not a scholarship kid." Leo offered a slow, genuine smile, wrapping his arm around her waist. "No, Chloe, I'm not." The invisible boy of Oak Ridge was gone forever, and as they walked back into the ballroom, leaving the ruins of the Harrington dynasty behind them, the city of Chicago silently bowed to its new prince. What an explosive ending. The quiet kid wasn't just a survivor. He was royalty in the shadows. From brutal high school bullying to a Mafia masterclass in revenge, Leo and Chloe's story proves that true power never has to shout. If this intense Mafia drama kept you on the edge of your seat, smash that like button. Share this story with your friends who love a massive plot twist, and subscribe for more thrilling, real-life inspired stories.